What's up, Battleground Z Warriors? Welcome to the Super Saiyan Smite podcast. I'm Real, your host, and today we got a little we got a little nostalgic a nostalgia to run through today. First, I'm gonna start off by announcing that the Morton Man won um, the giveaway sponsored by Dad Gaming Esports, supporting gamers and gamer dads and mental health. Super Saiyan. I also like. I got another big announcement. Is I'm working on a Smite Jeopardy, which is going to be like an entire like game show within the podcast, which is going to be pretty interesting. I'm taking applicants. If you could find me on Discord, by joining the Dad Gaming Esports, you'll be able to find me on Discord. I'm real SSJ within their server, and yeah, just shoot me a DM. I'm looking for applicants, which could be really interesting. We have about like 6 people interested right now. Um, so I mean, with that said, let's dive into our guest. Our guest is a longtime Smite veteran who's been in the game since like open beta, like Smite One open beta, ZombieTantalus.
What's going on, folks?
Z10, uh, tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you? And kind of what got you into Smite?
So, I'm a 35-year-old, 34. Crap, somewhere after 30, stuff gets fuzzy. But, I'm 34 years old, been playing Smite for a fairly absurd amount of time at this point. What got me into it, weirdly enough, was like just a hatred for the viewpoint of League of Legends. I had a bunch of friends trying to play League of Legends. They tried to get me into it, and I was like, this is a really cool concept. But if I wanted to play Diablo, I would go play Diablo. Um, I just couldn't stand the viewpoint, and I don't even remember what buddy it was, but they were like, "Yo, there's a third person one. It's like League, but it's third person." And I was like, "All right, sold." And they're like, "And you get to play as mythological gods," and that was just a cherry on top for me. So
Okay, okay. And then I'm gonna go off script a little bit and ask, did did you start playing like Conquest right off the bat, or did you start like playing like the mini games like Arena or like some other game modes? I'm just curious.
Um, I I pretty much jumped into Conquest, yeah.
Okay.
Um, it was just very similar. And what the other thing was though, like I realized from a pretty early point that the only game mode that they were interested in balancing the game around was Conquest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it made sense. It's really hard to just dive into Conquest when you don't know what you're doing. But on the same note, like Arena doesn't help you learn anything other than mechanics. Um, Joust is more about like cheese team compositions. It just Conquest is where the balance was and where kind of the game's heart was. So that was just where I wanted to stay at.
Right. I mean, and that goes along with like like most people, like if you're playing the game, and I know you're fairly competitive, was like all the proceeds revolved around Conquest as well, and I'm sure like you might not have been like in the thick of it, but I'm sure you got into it fairly quickly with esports, or was that later
Oh,
on? Because I know that's mostly
you
what we
know,
talk about
e-
nowadays.
yeah, esports for me was somewhere around season 5.
Oh, okay.
Started playing in like Loki's Coliseum and Gods Arise Smite
Yeah,
League.
a long time ago.
Um, oh yeah,
Yeah.
longer than I'd like to think about. Um, started playing in those and just kind of went from there. Um, but yeah, oh god, that was a long time. That
Yeah.
was almost 10 years ago. I hate it here. Uh,
um, and then was there a god that like kind of stood out above the rest, like whenever you first started?
I mean, when you talk about like beta of Smite 1, um the gods that like immediately come to mind were things like Bologna or Guan Yu. Um you ask like longtime players the most broken gods that have ever been released, and there's a solid 8 out of 10 chance that like Bologna or Guan Yu make it into that conversation.
Hmm.
I physically remember with my own two eyes watching a Bologna go into the 3 stance and solo a tower with no minions, no like one item, just walked in and soloed a tower,
Bro, that's
healed
that's crazy.
entirely, and you're like, what do I do about this?
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm sure like over time, like that's kind of like refined down to like do you have a good like a favorite god right now or a favorite select couple?
I mean, I do have a favorite select few. Um, which I mean, with the amount of time I put into Smite 1, and I don't feel like you can play comp at a high level without knowing how to play pretty much every god in the game, because
Right.
you need to know how to play into pretty much every god in the game. Um, but I definitely gravitate towards Scylla, Cupid, Morrigan. I was a big fan of Set.
Set
Um,
was a lot of fun.
oh god, was he? He was Set. Set was
Yeah.
Set was great. I mean, he was one of those high skill gods, but
Yeah.
like if you were able to play him effectively, he was a lot of fun. Um, I yeah, I'd say like Scylla, Morrigan, and probably Cupid are oh well, I can't forget Amuzin Cobb.
AMC.
Uh, uh, man, AMC, I can't wait until he makes his way into Smite 2. But I,
Mm-hmm.
the god was always kind of dog water in Conquest for the most part.
Yeah.
But he was so much fun. The god was so much fun to play.
And then this is a bit of a different question. Is there any older features in the game, like early on, that you like missed that like you were like sad they left, like early on, and then maybe like transition into like
Um, I wouldn't really say I miss it, but I did like the visual better when the Titan was a giant Minotaur.
Okay,
Um, but outside of that, no, that's one thing. Now, god balance and all that's a totally different conversation. But one thing that I will say for the Smite devs and the way that Smite's evolved over the years, for the most part, most of the features and stuff that they have removed and replaced with other things, for a large majority, they've been pretty good changes. Like with any development cycle, you have had some stinkers
yeah.
crop up, but for the most part, changes tend to be good. Um, I can't really think of one like off the top of my head that I would just want back. I mean, I kind of miss Pyromancer, just giving the speed buff
Yeah,
and not having anything to do with knocking my towers down without
right.
having to, siege them.
Yeah,
But
I really enjoyed the and I'll show you later, but the portal demon. Portal demon was kind of crazy. And like it was huge like stone in like Smite history in my opinion. Even though it's
yeah,
overshadowed. It was overshadowed. Like that was like season 6, 5 maybe.
um, yeah,
And then it
yeah, somewhere in
transitioned.
there.
Yeah, and then it transitioned
Do you
because
remember when it was much later in Smite 1, but they brought back the season 1 conquest map
like
for
as
a
like
little
a
while?
second mode or like
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I remember.
And it was I remember playing it, and it occurred to me, I was like, I never realized how map design is also affected by the gods in the game. Because like you went back to play that season 1 map, and like, I always enjoyed playing Giannis in mid.
Yeah. Also,
And
side note, that wasn't the season one map. That was the original launch map before they changed it. I
yeah,
went back and looked at like all the maps, and they launched the game with like a general like map that had like the side camps and whatever, and then they went away from it, and then they brought it back in Smite 2.
yeah, uh,
Which in my opinion, like isn't like. I think they just wanted to start with a base again because that's exactly what they did in Smite One. They were like, "Let's see how this goes," and I feel like they'll end up taking away making the map smaller again because that's just like,
yeah. I I think there's I really think there's like an aspect of map design within the game that like certain gods like Giannis, for instance, because when you went back to that map,
mm,
it was very clearly apparent that that map was not designed when Giannis was in the game, because there was a lot of things that Giannis could do on that map that just, it was absurd.
right,
Um, so I agree with you. I like what Smite 2 has done with just kind of starting with that base and adding things in, trying things. And then I mean that was kind of what the really early part of Smite 1 felt like, was just this trial and error
right,
kind of, uh okay, we're gonna do this. Oh, that was terrible. Get that out of here. Uh,
yeah.
what were we thinking?
And that moves us into our next question: is there a craziest patch or change that like you can think of off the top of your head?
I mean, the craziest patch I remember, and I mean, you can ask players from all across, Smite's history, and you're going to get 100 different answers. But just the craziest thing I remember seeing was the Baron Samdi release. Uh, the Baron Samdi release was absolutely god awful. And back at this point in Smite, they were patching the game pretty much every like week and a half, 2 weeks, I think it was. They nerfed this god 14 patches in a row before he was still good. Like the god was still good after like 13 or 14 nerfs. I remember I had never even touched the god, didn't look at his abilities, hadn't watched a video, didn't do anything. Walked into a conquest game with this god, was 1v4ing and walked out like 23-2, ended the game. I
Damn.
like Baron was absolutely wild. And I
Yeah.
mean, Merlin is an honorable mention. That was pretty absurd. RDO, King Arthur, once people figured out, well, after they watched Fine OK play him,
Mm.
um, because I remember the Arthur release and everybody was like, oh no, this god's terrible. And
No,
then
he
they
was
watched
not.
Fine OK
He was not.
1v5ing a team and they're like, oh wait, we
Yeah.
just put Glad Shield on him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Glad
Heard.
shield, then auto cancel everything. Yeah, for
Oh
sure.
man.
And then
Yeah, I mean, they've had doozies over the years.
yeah, I mean, it's not. I don't think it's easy to bring a character in and try to like balance it, especially whenever you're trying to do all these cool things to make things like interesting. But do you have like a favorite Smite era?
So for me, and honestly, I think for a lot of which I mean, the esports were a really interesting dynamic over the years. Obviously, like season 2, 3, you had the NRG team with the Amelito, um, Yaman, all these guys, but I'd say like season 5 through 8 was just kind of a golden era of Smite. Um, the game was in a good spot. The community was pretty active. The
Yeah.
esports are great. That was when like Paul, Sam for Soccer, and those guys came into the scene. Um, I like season 5 through 8 was fantastic. The worst for me was like the 9.5. That it was atrocious. I mean, as a backliner,
Hmm.
it was cool because you're like,
Yeah.
hey, I don't get one shotted anymore. But what it did to the game was awful.
Yeah,
Um,
it was weird, and it definitely made the game, I think, easier in a sense. It made the game,
well, it allowed you to get away with positioning that you
yeah,
shouldn't, and
yeah,
I think it made a lot of players worse mechanically. It made them get comfortable doing things that they shouldn't be.
yeah.
And then I remember when they did the revert,
It
and
felt
all of a
crazy.
sudden you were watching your mid go 0-7 4 minutes
Hmm.
in, and it's like yes, by the way, for the the last 10 years before that patch,
Yeah,
you can't face plant Cezanne with a Vulcan.
yeah. And
Um,
I think they need to take a little bit of a lesson from that a little bit more, in my opinion, for the TTK, like in the early game for Smite 2, because like I feel like you can actually get away with quite a bit. Like you like if in solo lane, like if you hit someone, like the minions aren't gonna kill you. Like in Smite
right.
1, like if you hit someone, the minions will kill you, right? Like you aggro the minions and you're dead. Like period. Like that doesn't happen in Smite 2. At least I don't feel like that happens in Smite 2.
It will in the like the mid lane, the duo lane. If you're on a character with a smaller like base health pool,
Yeah.
wave one, wave two, you don't want to eat aggro from the full minion wave.
Right.
You just but I do feel like I have had to play solo once or twice, and I feel like it's pretty
Yeah.
what's the word, just like riskless. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you can
There's
you
no
can just
risk for sure.
knock the snot out of your opposing solo laner in the middle of a wave and just not care.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's how I felt because I played Mulan the other day, and it just like I felt like laning in solo lane was just fairly easy. Like there was nothing like crazy going on. And then like that brings me to my next question is like, what do you think there was a like your least favorite era in Smite?
yeah, like definitely after the 9.5 patch,
Okay.
it like I said, it just people people got comfortable with bad positioning,
Mm-hmm.
and well, it's like I said, when they did the revert, it showed
Yeah.
because people forgot that they forgot positioning. So many of them. And
It,
they got comfortable in this, and they got destroyed
as
after. And
as an
then I remember the reviews. They're like, "Oh, this game's terrible now. I'm dying."
Yeah, as an above, like I guess I would classify myself as like an above average player. Like I do like make plays like at times, and then sometimes I just don't. But that's just normal. But I felt like I took advantage a lot in that era whenever they reverted, and like I was just like slamming like rank queues and just like killing everyone level 1 because like I'm a Scylla main, so I'm one shotting, especially with the minion buff that she got along the same lines.
I get it. I get it, man. I mean, everybody did it though. Like even the high end players, because I mean that's just taking advantage of what's in the game, right? But
Yeah,
like even the high end players got comfortable with some positioning that like they shouldn't have been doing.
right.
Um, and I don't consider myself to be like a high end player, but I noticed myself doing it. Like I was it was right after the revert. There was a Susano or something trying to invade my red buff, and I was like, yeah, I'll just go fight him. And then I got one shotted, and it was like, oh yeah,
Oops. Yeah,
I don't have 1,000 health at level 6 anymore. I
yeah,
forgot about that.
yeah. I also forgot about like how big of a change that was. That was an insane like how big or how much that made a difference in the game at the time.
Oh yeah.
But I got a little bit of a twist on fuck one, marry one, and kill one, and it's called Blessed, Smashed, and Banished. Um, And your three choices are Bacchus, Cupid, and Cthulhu.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. So we're gonna go with banish first. That's got to be Cthulhu. Tentacles. Like
Tentacles, you can't do tentacles? What?
I,
I always thought it,
I
tentacles were interesting. Like, in my
Look,
opinion. But
look, I'm not kink shaming. Do you, boo? But I was a little scarred after Davy Jones and Dead Man's Chest. I don't do the tentacles. Uh, Now bless that's got to be Bacchus. Like the duo forever. You talk about like a friend to just chill with for good. That's got to be Bacchus. And Smash Cupid. I mean, gotta love.
right, and then he eats your heart, right?
Hey,
Hey. I mean,
look,
if we're going back to like the legit lore, like it gets crazy.
well,
Anyway,
I wasn't using.
I wasn't using it. And then I'm gonna let you select the next three for the next guest. The next three
Uh,
characters.
all
I
right,
don't have
all
to. I'm
right,
gonna have to
all
write it
right.
down.
So let's go with Izanami, Aphrodite,
Making this too
and
easy.
Nua. Oh, there's no shot that's easy. Cause like you got to get rid of one of them. Say what?
Well, it's easy for me, right? I'm not gonna answer it. I'm gonna let the next contestant, I guess, not contestant, but next guest do that one. All right. And a lot of people did like let's move on. That was um what did the beta feel like for all the people who didn't play the beta, like which is the majority of the Smite player base? Like, how did the Smite 1 beta feel whenever you started? It was a long time ago. It's hard to say, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, it with all the map iterations over the years,
and maybe like once we get into I have a slideshow coming up. Once we get into my slideshow, you might be able to elaborate a little bit more. But
well, beta. I remember feeling um, it had a level of jank to it. Um, which I mean, it's a beta. The game was built in Unreal 3.
yeah,
Like,
I mean, all MOBAs at that time I think had their own jank, in my opinion.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
Like,
Every MOBA has jank, but I I remember it being very, very like team fight oriented. Um, it was very like post 15-20 minutes. It was like we lose a team fight. It's just done. Um, and that kind of came and went with the addendums of certain gods and certain mechanics. It was like I mentioned the Bologna earlier. When you had a character that came out that could just legitimately solo the towers without your team having to siege them. Um, it added some pretty janky dynamics to the game, but they patched, they grew, they learned.
mhm.
Um, I, yeah, like I can't even see that map in my head
Yeah,
anymore. Like it's been
it's been a long
so
time.
long.
Yeah, and I think we've already kind of answered this question. Is there any like key moments of growth, and that could be within the community or within the game, that really like made a difference to you, that kind of changed your perspective about the game?
Uh, I'd say like probably the biggest growth moment for the community was between like season 5 and 10. Just the growth of like the amateur community, the leagues, the casting.
Hmm.
I remember when the league started with like Loki's Coliseum, Gassel, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
There wasn't production, there was no casting, the games weren't really streamed or anything like that. And going from that to like the midway point where you had Archangel Smite League,
Hmm.
um, Cleety, some of these things, and then they started getting the idea to start streaming some of this stuff in QSL. And I remember the first like games that got streamed out of a lot of these leagues, and the casters, it was just like dudes sitting there talking like a podcast about the game. Um, and then you move to like now where it's damn near pro production quality
Hmm.
going on for a lot of these leagues, and like having been there the whole time and watched that evolution has been really cool. And to that extent, I also think that in a large way that amateur community is what kept Smite alive through its
Hmm.
last few years.
Yeah. No, and I can agree with that. And then like okay, let's talk about like role identity, like solo jungle. And like how do you think let me rephrase this question. Like the role identity from Smite 1 to Smite 2, do you feel like it's lost or improved?
I think it's a little of both. Um, you know, there's so like in some ways I definitely think that the role I think it's improved a bit. Um, they definitely, I won't say all the way, but they definitely somewhat achieved what they set out to do with Smite 2. In the sense that everybody can build magical and physical items,
Hmm.
and they went with this like more complex and robust item building system, which is cool. And then they took away the character classes, and so in some ways it's improved, but I part of that I think fell kind of flat. uh
Right.
look at Ganesh jungle right now. I please explain to me why I can quadra kill a team with Ganesh in less than 4 seconds, nearly by myself.
Hmm.
Um, and on top of that, they got rid of the class system, so there's no more guardians, no more warriors. Yet Ganesh still ends up with 3,000 base health just because. So like they've and there's certain gods where they put them into the game and they have no int scaling
Yeah.
to go along with this new building system. So you've removed their class role, and you've given them some plus ones, and they now have
Yeah.
the ability to build the magical items, but it does absolutely nothing
Yeah.
for them, so they may as well have remained exactly as they were.
Yeah, and whenever it comes to items, like I had assumed that all characters were going to have int or um like uh strength,
Right.
right? And I feel like if they would have done that, they could have like, created these like this character does this if they have int and this character does this if they have strength. Like heal like plus healing, kind of like they did with Guan Yu. But like I thought they were going to do that with all characters. And like maybe have like a different system in where like if you build int you get like protections or something like that, or like
Right.
more protections, kind of like which could help with like Guan Yu, like because the only way you're getting a bunch of healing is if you're building int, but like you're not getting
Right.
tanky, so it kind of feels bad to do. in my opinion. So like I think they could have leaned a little bit more into the every character gets a bonus one way or the other,
Right.
but that's a little bit off topic of what we were talking about. But um
Uh, Yeah, just like in the overall sense, though, I guess I would say that like a lot of the role identity has been lost. They've given the ability for different characters to play roles that they wouldn't have been able to accomplish in Smite 2. Um, but overall, with completely like removing the class system and most characters only scaling one way, I feel like a lot of that identity is just kind of lost.
yeah, especially with the community where they believe that like this should be played in this role, and then like other people are like, I can play whatever I want. Like there's no roles, so it kind of
Right.
like people get upset and pissy about it in a sense. So after like years of Smite One, is there anything that hasn't been done in Smite or that happened in Smite One that like Smite Two you think you know they should take a little bit more notes on to?
Um, one of the big things for me right now is like the the time to kill and the catch up mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it, as far as like where it's healthy for the game, I think that at a lower level, at a casual level, that it gives people who don't have as much experience with the game more time to learn, and it makes it a little easier to try and come back when you're down a lot. But you go through like most phases of Smite 1, and if you're down 10, 12,000 gold, you're toast.
Mm-hmm.
That game is over. I've seen a large number of games where between the gold bounties and all the bonuses and everything, you can absolutely turn a match back around from
Yeah,
10k
it's
down with one
also
team fight.
it's also harder to get to that point. I feel like most of
Yeah,
the time you don't really see the deficit really going like that like big within the first 20 minutes, at least 20
yeah.
minutes. Like it's really hard to get a 10k lead in my opinion.
And so yeah, I mean, I think I think it's healthy for a competitive and a pro scene where if you're really just getting slobber knocked, I don't enjoy all of the catch up and comeback mechanics. Um, outside of that, the biggest thing that I think Smite 2 needs to learn from Smite 1 is and they have been doing this. I've seen the league announcements and this and that, but they I really think they need to continue to try and do so and just nurture and grow this amateur community.
Yeah.
Um, it you're gonna make money from the game. I all of these like competitive and league players stuff like that. They buy the items, they buy the skins, they buy the packs. Um, I think that's the way forward for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And this one's a bit out there, but if you had one patch to design, like, and like, think about like what they're able to get done in like a patch,
Right.
concur with the current like Smite dev team, how would you design it, and what would be the main focus?
That's oh geez, real. That's a really interesting question. Um, you know, I think that the first thing I would probably do is like make that shift towards a lower time to kill. Um, That that would probably be the first move, and maybe even within that, which that might take more than one patch because it would be a lot of work with all the
Yeah,
gods.
it'd be patch and then
But
balance.
like, given that the characters are getting higher base protections and higher health and able to be played in squishy roles, I think I would probably either bring the classes back or go so far as to say, like, we'll take Ganesh for instance. If a guardian or a warrior in this is being played in a jungle role,
Then they should lower the health on it. Right.
drop their base health to that
And
of
protections. Yeah.
yeah. um I think that would be a really healthy
Yeah.
change for the game.
Yeah, because there's a lot of
Because
these guardians, which
yeah,
Ganesh
well,
is
I mean
the
Ganesh
biggest one.
being the
And then
primary
like
offender at the moment,
I,
but
I think the Sobek aspect has potential, but I think his kit. I think they would need to
Sobek does a lot of
lower the
damage
cooldown.
anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah. So I could see that. Yeah.
But that would be
So
a huge patch.
yeah, it would be a
Like,
huge patch, huh? Yeah. We're just spitballing. So I have a slideshow, and I'm gonna go over it, and then we're gonna talk about like the changes. Um, or I'm gonna run through. No, I'll do the slideshow first. So, I believe you can see my screen share.
yep.
Let me fix something really quick. Then let's. Oh, that's not the right one. Okay. And then slideshow. And then let me turn off my camera on the stream. Nope. 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 We're coming back. And then I'm gonna turn on my camera. Now we're good. Okay. All right. So the original maps, which here you had this cave around Fire Giant in the original
Yeah.
like launch. Then you had a red buff, and then all the buffs on the outside of the map, which is that's a lot of farm, and you know they definitely didn't go that far whenever they came into Smite 2. Then the revised map, they removed outside jungle completely, just had the inside map, which is
Yeah.
basically the same for the preseason right before season 1 launched. And then I have like visuals of I didn't actually get visuals of the original map. I got visuals of season 1. It was really hard to find pictures on everything. And then like as the map like grew and changed, a lot of this was just visual updates instead of like actual map changes until like we had our bigger changes, which happened around season 5 and then season 8, which they never for the most part, all the farm on the map was pretty much the same. They added a little bit more in season 7. In 7 like through 9. And then season 9, which is Smite 1 current map here, which they even made even bigger. Which I really did like where they went with this map in season 10 and 11. Okay. And then this was season 1. This wasn't and that is a very blurred picture. I hope you guys can see it fine.
Yeah.
And then I went through and had like a bunch of different this is the opposite side of the map, and I tried to get Fire Giant in most of it, and then like a Thor ult around Fire Pit.
Ace to the face, man. Oh,
Yeah,
that was a long time ago.
a long time ago. And then season 2, they had like a big revision on what the map looked like. Apollo Olds. That is the same picture. And then this is closer to like season 4 or 5. I didn't get all the season, or no, this is like season. This is probably season 3, I think.
Hurlin, Fun Baller, Benji. Yeah.
Yeah, I just went through. It was easier to find these pictures on YouTube, so I just screenshot all the pro games. And I really like Fire Giant Pit around this stage. This is whenever they had the fire imps standing around
Yeah.
Fire Giant. Which was an interesting change, and then it eventually transitioned into, this map looked insanely different in season 5.
Yeah.
Like the game really like took a huge like turn to like what they wanted the game to look like. But if we go back to like here, and I was watching the Smite. Who was it? Chris Dickerson. He did a like. Was it Chris? Yeah, he did like the side by side of what the games look like.
Yeah.
This looks a lot like the initial launch of Smite 2. Like the shading and like the darker like browns and grays and colors.
Yeah.
And then like it transitioned and get back to where we were. And then this map was this was whenever Tiamat was released, and they had Tiamat was like season 10, right? But this is where they had like the crack along the middle of the map, which in my opinion like looked like really it looked really pretty. Like the game, like this map looked really pretty in my opinion, with the crack along the entirety of the map, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I really
No, it
liked
was a
it.
really good looking map.
Yeah, and then they opened up Fire Giant Pit a little bit more, and like throughout the entirety of Smite, they kept opening up Fire Pit, so that way like the fights would be like more visible, and like I think it was like for like a viewpoint. Yeah. Then we have
Dorman
Solarlight.
God there. Don't miss that God.
We'll get him eventually. Yeah. And then my favorite map, the snow map, was insane. Like, they just took everything and made it snowy, and it was I loved this map, personally.
Man.
Bear with me, I'm sick. Yeah, and this is whenever. Wait, I had a picture of Portal Demon, but I think I missed it. And then it transitioned into what it is now, Pyromancer. But I think Pyromancer is a little bit, much different nowadays. They added Totem, and then eventually Teleporter, which is the current Smite 2 map, or Smite 1 map. My bad. And then
Wow.
Smite 2, which is, much different. I do like they really kept the fire pit like pretty much the same in Smite 2 compared to Smite 1 and what it like ended up being, in my opinion. Yeah.
That fire kind of got to a point, in Smite 1 where like I really like what they've done with it in Smite 2. You cannot just walk up to it and solo it, or go at it with two people at 10-15 minutes into the game.
Right.
You legitimately have to make a team rotation on it. You've really got to have your people there. And I do like that. I do like what they've done with fire and Smite too. Gold's about the same as it's ever been. Um, the buffs from it are a lot better now, though. You get the bonus tower damage from the third one. You get the movement speed, the ancient fury.
Yeah, I mean, I really do like Gold Fury. And then the like, like the. Have you seen the data mine for Gold Fury?
No.
Um, so they've been doing some deep diving on like it's been in the works forever. And I don't know if it'll ever come, or I don't know like how if it's gonna work. But they have like different. Uh they have like Earth Fury and the Lightning Fury and all these like different furies they intended on
Yeah.
maybe adding to the game that would all have different bonuses, which could be like really interesting. They don't have all they have is like the artwork kind of like done, and then like a rough like outline on like what it is. But
Yeah.
uh, I think it could be really interesting. I personally like really like the idea of it. Yeah, so going back to the game, uh, beta had like it launched and had like a basic 3 lane map, which at first had the outside lanes with extra camps, and then they like refined it. Um, and then season 1 was just a bit more polished. Um, and then season 2 had a big like jungle lane rework. And feel free to input on any of these that you remember or whatever. Season 3 had new camps and jungle depth, which kind of changed the way jungle like was played and looked and felt. And then season 4 was the major like visual overhaul.
Yeah.
Um, and then season 5 ended up being the huge like map overhaul. Like they changed like the layout of the map, and like they made it a little bit bigger. Season 6 was just like more tweaks to make the map feel a little bit better. Season 9 was another huge like visual rework. And then season 7 through 9 they actually did the snow map within like one of those seasons, which I think was like season 8 or season 9. Um,
In there. Yeah.
yeah, and then season 10 again had another huge like they were like everyone's like the map's too small, like we need a bigger map. And then like right before they launched this, uh who was it? PBM was like, here's what's wrong with the map, and he like walked from one side of the map to the other side of the map in like 30 seconds or something like that. And he's like, why is this possible? Or I think it was less. But it was like this little video clip, and then they made the map bigger. Um, uh, and then
Fair enough.
season 11 they kind of refined. They didn't really do a whole lot because they were working on Smite 2. And then Smite 2 is a bigger map, a new engine, graphics, a new item system, like everything that Smite 2 has added on top of the base game. I feel like a lot of this was just on top of the base game. Like the game, like I don't think there was anything like that, like completely was outshadowed and didn't come over from Smite 1. I don't think.
Yeah. And I mean, they did learn from a lot of their mistakes, like with the maps, because you just went over all of the seasons, and like honestly, the huge standout to me is like you move from like beta to the season 1, moving into like season 2, and one of the big things that I remember was that like at the earlier phases of the game, gods like Zeus, you couldn't fight into it anywhere outside of a lane, really. Like you just could not fight into it because the jungle corridors were super cramped.
Yeah.
It was, it was almost like this little tunnel network, and if you grouped up, a single Zeus ult could just wax your team. It was really cramped. It was really hard to fight in the jungle corridors, and kind of a throwback to what I was talking about earlier. That was one of the reasons that, like, on that, when they brought that map back
Hmm.
as a game mode, stuff like Giannis just felt oppressive.
Yeah.
Um, that so I do think that a lot of what they did in kind of opening up the jungle lanes, and they've tried some stuff over the years. Shout out to the jungle vines that you had to hit twice to get through, that absolutely never stopped anyone from doing anything ever. um like,
They tried.
you know
They tried. I
hey,
thought it was
it
interesting.
was it
Yeah.
was there. It looked cool.
Yeah.
It looked cool, if nothing else.
Yeah.
But I remember
Yeah.
they
I
just
think it
kind
was
of
like
took
what,
it
two
out.
autos? Like you hit it with like two
Yeah.
autos, and then they broke
Oh
down.
yeah.
It was interesting.
But yeah, it was like they just kind of took it
I
out.
forgot about
And
that.
yeah, man, it was just like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Well, yeah, that slowed me up for a whole quarter of a second. uh
Yeah. And then is there anything that you can recall that's been asked for since the very beginning of Smite? Or that you can remember that's been asked for and never came into Smite?
oh god. um not off the top of my head. I one of the one thing that comes to mind, but like most of the things that have really been asked for have been addressed. That's one thing that I can say for the Smite community, like, that you don't get with a lot of the other MOBA community stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in calls with pros and high res employees, and I've literally talked to people that, like, I've had conversations with them and played games with them that like have development power, influence, stuff like that. That's not something you can say about a lot of games. Like, I played League for a year. I've never met a League dev.
Yeah.
um but most of the major concerns have like been addressed
Mm-hmm.
over the course of years. It might take them a couple of patches and some thought, but for the most part, they're fairly responsive, and they do a pretty good job. What do old players still ask for? Like a bugless Morrigan. Um, we're never gonna get it, but like, we've asked.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's tricky. It's tricky. And then we've already talked about a lot of these, but like, if there was three changes you wanted to happen to Smite 2, like what would that be?
I definitely think that the biggest one would be two that we've already kind of like discussed, which would be, you know, kind of dialing back the base health pools for a lot of your like guardian and warrior characters going into other roles.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one, I think, would be to what we talked about earlier again. Really give the gods the viable option to build either int or strength. Um, and outside of that, I
I mean, we also talked about time to kill too,
yeah,
so we might have covered
I
all
think,
of them.
yeah, I mean, I would get more gods in,
Yeah.
but they're actively working on that. That's been one of the bigger frustrations, especially like starting with the very early beta, when there was, or alpha, when there was, what was it, 22 or 23 gods, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
um and it's like the stuff that was strong was just strong, and there was no counter matchup to it because the gods that are the counter matchup didn't exist yet.
Mm-hmm.
And you're kind of running into that problem now. Like, you look at like Sobek and Ganesh. Which I mean, Ganesh being a top pick doesn't have a damn thing to do with support. Let's be real.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but Sobek's been like top of class for support
Mm-hmm.
the whole time.
Yeah.
Literally the whole time.
Yeah.
There's nothing that really shuts down Sobek until Ganesh came into the game. Ganesh has a decent matchup into Sobek.
Right.
Um, but I think as they add more gods, a lot of the dynamics and like meta gods are going to start shifting.
Yeah.
But
And I feel like there's
yeah,
like a decent variety right now out of like what's
yeah,
being played. Like
it's way better than
yeah.
it was. Like they've done a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
And then I lost my train of thought. Like completely lost it.
it'd be like that. If it's
Yeah.
important, it'll come back to you.
Yeah. And all the stuff that High Res has been working on, the new like player experience. Do you I mean, I guess vibe with any of the changes they made, like with the quick play and like the action cam or anything? Have you tried any of it? What's your experience? What's your thoughts?
I mean, the new player experience for Smite has always been kind of a dumpster fire, and that's a MOBA problem, not a Smite problem.
Yeah, it's a ton of information.
Um, yeah, and that's the thing with a MOBA is like it is a steep learning curve.
Hmm.
You're not talking something that you can put 40 hours into and be like, okay, I know what I'm doing. Um, I remember in Smite One, I considered people that had 1,000 or 1,500 hours to still be fairly new players.
Right.
Um, it's Smite is definitely a game that like requires a significant time commitment. Because at the end of the day, it's a learning curve. It's a learning curve that is extremely difficult to figure out, and like at the end of the day, figuring it out requires you to know so much information.
Hmm.
Because how you position in team fights and how you build and how you play the game all vary game to game based on team compositions and where different gods are at in the roles, and you need to know their abilities and their cooldown timers, and it just
Yeah, it's kind of like a feeling thing that
I'm
just
sure it's overwhelming,
yeah.
like as a new player, to come in and try and do it. And I mean, they've tried to make the tutorial a little more robust, but Neith is one god in the game who also, by the way, probably needs to be toned down on the subject of requests from high res, because I'm really tired of getting one shotted by her around a corner. Um,
Neith is insane. I've been talking about it like pretty much
Bruh.
every episode. I'm just like Neith has
I,
not been touched since the game released. Like she's been buffed and she's been
I don't
buffed
even
and she's
rage
been
about
buffed,
it
and I'm
anymore.
just
I
like,
turn a corner, get one shot, and I'm like, up, okay, all right, fine,
yeah.
one,
Uh, but I
whatever. This is
also
my life.
I made a point to talk about with Mort last week, and that's this week, but last week, that there's characters in Smite, and they've always done this. Like there's characters in Smite that are like Neith, and that are like, I don't know. Neith is the one that stands out above the rest. That they want to be strong, because those are ones that like newer players gravitate towards because they're easy. They list them as easy characters, and they want them to feel strong against other characters so that people keep playing. And I feel like that's been true in Smite for a long time. Like Neith has been one of those characters that's been in the meta forever. She has more
I
builds now,
mean,
but
like honestly, Neith in Smite One. I mean, yeah, I'm sure she was really popular at like low levels, but when you get past like that diamond area, I don't ever remember seeing her. Um, because you had gods like a Wheelish that like if you got that counter matchup, you're just toast. Which she's a lot more valuable in Smite 2, because the way that they did the backflip, there's a lot more that you can backflip over, and the way
Yeah, over the
CC
walls is
buffering
huge.
works now,
Awful.
you can get it. Yep, it's atrocious. Uh, but you can still get it off in situations where you wouldn't have been able to before, and it's kind of back to that whole thing of like you can get away with more.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But you know, if there's like any advice that you had for like someone starting out, what would it be?
Oh, oh boy. One first and foremost, develop a god pool. I think one of the most important things that you can do as a new player is to try and understand the game and to understand your matchups. And, understanding your matchups involves understanding what the gods do. And you can go through and read their abilities, but that doesn't give you an understanding.
Right.
You need to try these gods, you need to play them a little bit. Even if you decide you hate that god, at least you know what to expect from that god in a team fight. um
Yeah.
and past that, uh another big thing to realize is that mechanics will only take you so far. You can be an extraordinarily gifted player mechanically and still get your behind handed to you regularly because like mechanics only take you so far. You At some point you will peak mechanically. um for a lot of people that's in the area of like diamond. um and you will peak mechanically. You're not going to hit any more of your abilities or autos than you do at that point. And once you kind of get to that point, what's going to take you further is decision making, positioning, micro macro play, learning and understanding the math behind the game and how and when to do things. And the best advice for any new player I can give is, before you make a rotation, ranked, casuals, if you're stepping your foot into comp, before you make a rotation, you need to have one thought, which is, what is the best case scenario of this rotation? And if the answer to that question is a kill, go secure your farm.
All right. Well, um, make sure you get in all the farm in lane before rotating or in the jungle. It's gonna help you out a lot more than I just broke everything. Um, for the most part, it's probably gonna help you out unless like your team is gonna die to the mid laner also rotating.
You got to
but
get stuff
but
after the
yeah.
stuff.
Um, but it is there anywhere that people can find you? Do you stream or anything? Are you like still streaming? Are you actively trying to promote anything? Um,
Not really. I do a little casting here and there. I play a lot of ranked, play a lot of casuals, but Discord's ZombieTantalus. Anybody that ever wants to play is welcome to hit me up.
all right,
Um,
all right. Well, a huge thanks to Ztan for being an amazing guest, and a huge thanks to Dad Gaming Esports for sponsoring the show. Um, look out for more uh, Steam giveaways, um, as well as the I'm losing my train of thought again. Anyway,
Stuff, things.
the Jeopardy. That's gonna be pretty interesting. I'm thinking about doing like a lot of things, like the Jeopardy is what I'm gonna start with, and then like maybe transition to any other kind of like game show I can do, like monthly, like with monthly episodes or something like that. So it'll be pretty interesting. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. Give us a thumbs up if you like the content. In the comments down below, make sure to, like, you know, if you have a problem with like how I'm running the show, or like, you know, or you just disagree with what we're saying on here, just drop it in the comments, and you know, we can talk about it. Anyway, I'm Real with Super Saiyan Smite podcast, and we'll see you next week. Bye.